About 30 miles north of Paris, in the quiet countryside of northern France, there is a Stone Age tomb. From the outside, it looks like a low stone gallery partially buried in the ground. From the inside, it is one of the most haunting archaeological sites in Europe. The tomb contains the remains of 132 people. They were laid to rest in two distinct waves, separated by a long, silent gap. The first group buried their dead there for about 100 years and then stopped. For centuries afterward, the tomb sat empty. Then, around the year 2900 BC, a completely different group of people arrived, opened the chamber, and began burying their own dead in the same place. The two groups had never met. They were not related. And in April of 2026, an international team of geneticists revealed the most likely reason why. The tomb is called Berry, after the small commune in northern France where it was found. The structure itself is a type of Neolithic monument known as an alley sepulchral, a gallery grave. It is one of hundreds of similar tombs built across northwestern Europe between roughly 4,300 and 3,100 BC, an era when farming communities across the region were constructing massive collective stone monuments at an extraordinary scale. The new study, published in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution on April 3, 2026, was led by Frederick Searsholm of the Globe Institute at the University of Copenhagen, along with senior author Martin Sikora. The team sequenced full ancient genomes from the teeth of all 132 individuals in the tomb. What they were able to see was extraordinary. The first burials at Berry, dating to roughly 3,200 to 3,100 BC, belonged to a single extended community. The DNA showed sprawling family trees, some spanning 5 full generations. Brothers and sisters were buried alongside parents and grandparents. Children were laid next to cousins. This was a clan, not a random selection of the dead. They were the descendants of Europe's first farmers, the population that had walked into the continent thousands of years earlier from Anatolia in what is now modern-day Turkey, bringing wheat, cattle, and the practice of building stone tombs. But something was wrong with these people. Archaeologists examining the bones noticed an unusual pattern. Far too many of the dead were young, children, adolescents, young adults in the prime of their lives. According to Laura Salanova, research director at France's National Center for Scientific Research and one of the study's co-authors, the demographic pattern is a strong indicator of crisis. A healthy, stable Neolithic population should not be burying that many young people. Something was killing them. The genetic team set out to find what it was. Using a cutting-edge DNA technique designed to capture every genetic trace preserved inside ancient bone, the researchers screened the 132 individuals for pathogens. They found several. The most important was Yersinia pestis, the bacterium that causes plague, the same disease that thousands of years later would become the Black Death. The Neolithic version was older, more primitive, but unmistakably the same lineage. The team detected it in 4 individuals at Berry, 3 of them from the early burial phase. They also found Borrelia recurrentis, the spiricete, responsible for louse-borne relapsing fever, a disease that spreads rapidly in crowded, unsanitary conditions and can be deadly in unprotected populations. They found yersiniosis, an intestinal infection. They even found herpes simplex virus 1. Most of these pathogens clustered in the early burial phase, alongside the unusual mortality. But the researchers were careful in how they framed what this meant. In a statement accompanying the study, Martin Sikora said the team could confirm plague was present, but that the evidence did not support it as the sole cause of the population collapse. Yersinia pestis was circulating across Neolithic Europe at this time, but a single disease cannot fully explain what happened next. Pollen records from across the Paris basin tell another part of the story. As the burials stopped, the forests came back. Fields that had been worked for generations were abandoned. Trees crept back across the landscape. The pollen signal indicates that human activity in the region collapsed almost completely. For somewhere between 1 and 2 centuries, the area around Berry became something close to empty. The same pattern shows up in cemeteries across France, Germany, Scandinavia, and parts of the British Isles. Settlements shrink, burials stop, megalithic tombs across the continent fall silent. This is the so-called Neolithic decline, a continent-wide demographic crisis that archaeologists have been arguing about for decades without being able to test directly. At Bury, for the first time, they finally could. The answer they found was unambiguous. The people who built and used the tomb in the first phase did not survive. They were replaced. Around the year 2900 BC, after roughly 2 empty centuries, the tomb at Bury began receiving bodies again. The people doing the burying were not the descendants of the first group. The genetic signal between the 2 phases was a clean break. The earlier population had carried the ancestry of northern French and German farming groups, the typical genetic fingerprint of Europe's first agricultural communities. The later population had a fundamentally different profile. Roughly 84% of their ancestry traced back to populations from the Iberian Peninsula and southern France. The newcomers were not steppe nomads from the east, which is the pattern seen in Scandinavia during the same period. They were farmers from the south, moving north into territory that had been emptied. The Y chromosome data tells the same story. In the first phase, the male lineages at Bury were diverse. In the second phase, one specific Y chromosome lineage suddenly dominates. The social structure changes as well. The sprawling family trees of the first phase, with their broad multi-generational pedigrees, are gone. The later burials show smaller, tighter kinship groups and what appears to be a more rigid patrilineal organization. This was not a slow cultural shift, it was a replacement. And the timing matches a pattern stretching far beyond Bury. The end of megalith construction across continental northwestern Europe falls right inside this window. Across France, Germany, the Low Countries, and into Scandinavia, the great Neolithic monument builders had simply vanished. Their tombs were not destroyed. They were not even forgotten. Some of them, like Bury, were quietly reopened by populations who had no connection to the people who built them. What is striking is that the same crisis produced different replacements depending on where you stood in Europe. In Scandinavia, the void was filled by steppe peoples from the east, ancestors of the Yamnaya. In Western Europe, the void was filled from the south by farming populations from Iberia. The continent was reshuffled, and the people who'd built the megalithic age, the ones whose ancestors had brought farming to Europe in the first place, were no longer running it. The Bury tomb is more than a burial site. It is a record of the moment when one prehistoric world ended and another began. A tight-knit Neolithic community, weakened by plague, relapsing fever, and pressures we still cannot fully reconstruct, simply did not make it. The forests grew back over their fields, and when the forests retreated again, the people who returned to the land were strangers. The disappearance of Europe's megalith builders has been a mystery for more than a century. 5,000 years later, ancient DNA finally has an answer. If this story changed how you see the Stone Age, subscribe to Origins Revealed. The next discovery is already coming.